Pearl, a wisp of a girl trapped in the stifling routine of her family's Texas farm in 1918, dreamt of a life that danced to a different rhythm. The dusty monotony of chores and the rigid expectations that hemmed her in were a suffocating anathema to her soul, which craved the freedom of expression through movement and exploration. One stolen moment, a twirl in her mother's forgotten finery, was a fleeting rebellion. The scowl that followed, a harsh reprimand in a tongue foreign to her dreams, German, a constant reminder of the cultural divide between her and her stoic mother, Ruth, extinguished the spark as quickly as it ignited. Assigned the thankless tasks that kept the farm afloat, Pearl poured her frustrations into whispered conversations with the indifferent farm animals. Her defiance, a theatrical flourish of a pitchfork punctuating her whispered desires, was a lonely performance for an unappreciative audience. A sudden, inexplicable rage, sparked by an overzealous goose, sent Pearl spiraling into a frenzy. The subsequent violence, a tremor that ran deeper than the incident itself, marked a turning point. Undeterred, she sought solace at the water's edge, the setting sun casting long shadows as she fed the unfortunate goose to Theta, the resident alligator, a silent witness to her turmoil. Dinner was a battlefield of unspoken resentment. Ruth, her weathered face etched with the lines of a life spent in service to duty, dismissed Pearl's dreams as frivolous selfishness. The calloused hands that kneaded bread and scrubbed floors couldn't comprehend the yearning that gnawed at Pearl's spirit. Duty, Ruth rasped, was the only constant, a harsh truth that felt like a cage around Pearl's yearning heart. Burdened with caring for her ailing father, Pearl found a fragile solace in the letters from Howard, a soldier fighting in the faraway war. Each word, a lifeline thrown across the ocean of uncertainty, held the promise of a future where dreams might have a place. Even amidst the drudgery of chores, Pearl snatched stolen moments of escape. A flickering picture show, a world of fantastical stories woven on a silver screen, offered a glimpse of a life beyond the endless rows of corn. It was during one such escape that she encountered a stranger, a spark of recognition flickering in their eyes. In their gaze, Pearl saw a reflection of her own yearning, a possibility, however fleeting, that her dreams might take flight. But the weight of responsibility, the invisible chains that bound her to the farm, proved too heavy. The backstage invitation, a whispered promise of a world where her talents could bloom, was a bittersweet temptation. Instead, Pearl clung to a tangible scrap of that world, a souvenir film frame, a flickering memory of a life that could have been. In a heart-wrenching chase through the endless rows of corn, a metaphor for the elusive nature of her desires, Pearl's dreams seemed to scatter on the wind, as ephemeral as the dust kicked up by her frantic flight. Yet, amidst the despair, a sliver of hope emerged. A clearing in the field revealed a whimsical scarecrow, its straw arms outstretched, a lopsided top hat crowning its head. In a spontaneous act of defiance, Pearl snatched the hat, a symbol of a world beyond the farm. With a joyful abandon that had been absent for too long, she twirled in the fading light, her imaginary partner a figment of her longing. The fantasy, however, shattered as abruptly as it began. The scarecrow, a silent witness to her outburst, transformed into the film projector operator, his startled face a stark reminder of the line between reality and illusion. Flustered and defensive, Pearl retreated back into the confines of her identity, desperately clinging to the shield of her marital status. But even as she retreated, a shadow of desire lingered in her eyes, a testament to the desperate intimacy she sought, even if only with a figment of her imagination. The spell of the scarecrow's hat shattered with a jarring call. "Pearl, don't bring that filth inside. Germs." Ruth's voice, heavy with practicality, pierced through the fading light. Back in the confines of the house, Pearl sought refuge in the bathroom, the scent of antiseptic a stark contrast to the musty fields. Her father, a silent sentinel in his chair, became the audience for her whispered recount of the day's events. Reaching for his hand, she searched for any flicker of recognition, a desperate plea for connection. But his weary gaze remained fixed on some unseen horizon. Dinner was a battlefield of suspicion. Pearl's fabricated story about the missing money met with Ruth's skeptical stare, leading to a terse exchange that left a bitter taste in the air. Discharged from the table, Pearl retreated to her room, the framed picture of Howard a beacon of distant aspirations. A shooting star streaked across the night sky, and she whispered a fervent prayer for escape. The next morning, the arrival of Pearl's in-laws, Mitzi and Charlie, their city clothes and refined manners a stark contrast to the dust and work-worn reality of the farm, sent a jolt through the household. But then came Mitzi's bombshell, a dance audition in town. A spark ignited in Pearl's eyes, a flicker of ambition. In that moment, Charlie, usually a source of annoyance, became her champion, her embrace filled with a desperate hope. Alone in the cool darkness of the bunkhouse, Pearl clutched the top hat and the program from the theater, talismans of possibility. Later, in the privacy of her room, she donned her mother's dress, the fabric whispering stories of a past life. The top hat perched on her head, a symbol of defiance and a flickering dream. Under the cloak of night, she found herself drawn back to the movie theater. The flickering light of the projector cast long shadows as she sought solace and perhaps a kindred spirit in the projectionist. Their conversation revealed a shared longing for something beyond their present reality, punctuated by the risque images of a French film. As the night deepened, Pearl poured out her soul, yearning for liberation from the constraints that had become her life. Returning home, she found her mother hunched over the kitchen table, tears staining her cheeks. The sight pierced through Pearl's facade of resolve, leaving her with a mix of empathy and unease. In the quiet of her room, Howard's face offered little solace, his gaze a reflection of her own uncertainty. Alone with her doubts, she grappled with who she was and who she yearned to be. The next day, a sliver of sunlight streamed into Pearl's room, rousing her from her restless sleep. She pushed her father's wheelchair out onto the porch, the morning air invigorating. Ruth watched their slow departure from the window, her face etched with worry. At the pond's edge, with the familiar scent of earth and water filling her senses, Pearl confessed her impending departure to her father, seeking comfort in the bittersweetness of their farewell. But their moment was shattered by Ruth's arrival. The air crackled with tension as Pearl questioned her mother's motives. Tears streamed down Ruth's face as she implored Pearl to understand the importance of acceptance, of finding contentment within the confines of their life. Frustration and anger bubbled in Pearl, leading her to confront her mother about her stifling expectations. As the fight escalated, Ruth, worn down by years of hardship, spoke of acceptance, a word that felt like a prison sentence to Pearl. The culmination of years of unspoken resentment erupted, spilling forth in accusations and ultimatums. In a desperate plea for control, Ruth grabbed a knife, offering it to Pearl as a twisted solution. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. As Pearl wrestled with the absurdity of the situation, a tragic accident unfolded. The details blurred, a scream echoing in the stillness. When the dust settled, Ruth lay injured, the weight of their fractured relationship hanging heavy in the air. In the aftermath, Pearl met her father's gaze, a mix of guilt and determination swirling in her eyes. The accident cast a long shadow, but beneath the weight of it all, a spark of defiance flickered. In stolen moments, she retreated within herself, picturing a stage bathed in light, the audience roaring in applause. A vision of herself, celebrated and free. Morning light revealed a hollowness in her chest. Seeking solace, she ventured back to the theater, drawn to the comforting hum of the projector. The projectionist, ever observant, saw through her facade. Their encounter, a brief respite filled with shared dreams and whispered secrets, was cut short by the harsh reality of her situation. Returning home, Pearl moved through the motions, a numb observer in her own life. A stolen caress with the projectionist offered a fleeting flicker of warmth, quickly extinguished by the flames of her desperation. When their encounter escalated, fueled by frustration and his unwelcome advances, Pearl's volatile emotions ignited. In a blur of violence, the projectionist's life was extinguished. Haunted by her actions, Pearl found Ruth weakened in bed. Guilt gnawed at her, twisting into remorse as she cared for her mother. A final, heartbreaking encounter unfolded. Pearl, in a somber farewell, donned her mother's dress, the fabric whispering of a life she was leaving behind. With a tender touch, she bid farewell to her father, his silence a heavy weight in the air. The church hall buzzed with anticipation. Pearl, waiting alongside a jittery Mitzi, felt a familiar numbness. Mitzi's nervous chatter was a world away, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Pearl. When her moment arrived, She commanded the music to begin. As she danced, the world dissolved around her. The stage materialized, not a stage at all, but a battlefield of dust and smoke. Other performers materialized beside her, a haunting ballet unfolding. Her movements were raw, powerful, a culmination of years of yearning and despair. The climax arrived with a roar. Fireworks exploded overhead, showering the stage in a blaze of light. Exhausted, triumphant, Pearl basked in the imagined applause. But the reality of the audition was far bleaker. The judges, faces devoid of emotion, delivered a crushing rejection, citing age and an image that didn't fit their mold. Tears welled up in Pearl's eyes. She desperately scanned the faces, searching for a flicker of recognition, a chance. But there was none. Mitzi found her outside, distraught and shattered. Offering a comforting embrace, she led Pearl back home. Inside, the stench of decay hung heavy in the air. Pearl, unable to bear the weight of her failure, confessed everything to Mitzi. Her insecurities, her darkest desires. She revealed her growing resentment towards Howard, the way she fantasized about escape, about infidelity. Then, in a shocking admission, she confessed the pleasure she found in harming others. Mitzi, horrified, recoiled. Her facade of warmth crumbled, replaced by a terrified resolve to leave. As she turned to depart, Pearl's desperation reached a boiling point. The need for control, for a shred of happiness, spiraled into violence. The aftermath was a horrifying tableau. In the cellar's cool darkness, Pearl found a perverse comfort, a twisted sense of peace beside her deceased mother. Days blurred into a horrifying spectacle of grisly acts and a macabre stage set with the living and the dead. When Howard finally returned, the farmhouse greeted him with a chilling silence. He stumbled inside, only to be met with a scene straight out of his nightmares. Pearl, in the center of it all, offered a haunting smile, the facade of a joyous homecoming a mask for the profound darkness that now consumed her.